Welcome to weekly ECG exercise case 2. Hope you enjoyed previous video on hyperkalemia. Today's video will particularly interest you more as this patient comes from current COVID pandemic situation and I am sure many of you will relate it to your own patients. So this was a 59-year-old female who presented with sudden onset of breathlessness since last 1 hour. She was discharged just a week back after recovering from severe COVID pneumonia and was not advised any oxygen at home. She is a known hypertensive and diabetic on regular treatment, but when she presented, she was tachypneic and hypotensive with blood pressure of 90/60 and respiratory rate of 32 per minute. Her oxygen saturation on room air was just 86%. This is her ECG on admission, and as discussed previously, I would request you to pause the video, write down your findings and restart the video again. Now when you look at the ECG, grossly, one would definitely pick up that there are a lot of STT changes throughout the ECG. So does this mean the patient has acute coronary syndrome with the given scenario and we should start treating it as ACS? Of course, it's a good thought to think about acute coronary syndrome with the current scenario, but never overlook the other findings and always complete the ECG analysis. So having said that, what are the other findings? Now if I look at the ECG, definitely the heart rate is faster. So how much is the heart rate here? I usually prefer to calculate the heart rate by counting number of R waves in long lead 2. Long lead 2 is a ECG rhythm strip for 10 seconds. So if you count number of R waves in long lead 2 and multiply by 6, this will give you the ventricular rate or the heart rate. This is especially important and becomes easy when you have irregular heart rate or irregular rhythm. So having said that, in this patient, the number of R waves in long lead 2 are 21. So if you multiply 21 by 6, you will get the heart rate of 126 per minute. That means this patient has a fast heart rate, tachycardia. The moment you have tachycardia, you are going to think what is atria doing. So atrial activity, that means you look at the P waves, and the P waves are best seen in long lead 2. If you look at the P waves in long lead 2 here, they are clearly visible, normal sinus P waves with normal PR interval. That means this patient has got sinus tachycardia. So now we have got sinus tachycardia with generalized T-wave inversions. I'm sure some of you will definitely say that there is ST elevation MI in inferior leads. So 2-3 AVF, there is a subtle ST elevation of 1-1.5 millimeters. But remember, whenever you say ST elevation, always compare your ST elevation with TP segment rather than PR segment. And if you do that here, there is actually no ST elevation. Having said that, what is the next abnormality here? Is I can see the axis here is abnormal and there is a S wave in lead 1 and R wave in lead AVF indicating that there is a right axis deviation. I am very much sure that some of you must have definitely picked up a peculiar pattern here, S in 1, Q wave in lead 3 and T inversion in lead 3. That means which we call usually S1 Q3 T3 pattern. Other than that, we have already picked up that there are T wave inversions, especially in precordial leads. And if you have a closer look at the ECG, there is definite ST elevation in lead AVR and V1. So now if you have to enumerate the ECG findings, patient has got sinus tachycardia, there is a right axis deviation, there are precordial T wave inversions, there is S1 Q3 T3 pattern and ST elevations in AVR and V1. With patient's history, presentation and current COVID situation where we know they are prothrombotic, one would definitely think of again right acute coronary syndrome, and it is wise to send cardiac biomarkers here. We also send this patient's cardiac biomarkers, but meanwhile we got an urgent bedside 2D echo of this patient which revealed that patient had RV dilatation on 2D echo but no regional wall motion abnormality. Also, when we checked patient's previous record for previous ECG, during her last admission, ECG was reported normal with normal axis. That means there was acute right axis deviation. So with the given findings on the ECG and 2D echo, you confirm the diagnosis of pulmonary embolism. In that case, the T wave inversions in precordial leads actually become right ventricular strain pattern. So with the ECG finding which we got in our patient, we also got an ABG done on the room air, which shows a PCO2 which is low and PO2 which is also low, indicating that this patient had acute respiratory alkalosis with moderate hypoxemia, which also support your diagnosis of acute pulmonary embolism. So what are the classical ECG characteristics in a suspected case of pulmonary embolism? The most common ECG abnormality is sinus tachycardia. The second important ECG abnormality is atrial fibrillation. But you can have any other supraventricular rhythm or supraventricular tachycardia in patients with pulmonary embolism. Patient may have incomplete or complete RBBB. Depending upon the size of the pulmonary embolism, there may be RV strain pattern. Patient may have right axis deviation. Patient may have what is called as S1Q3T3 pattern. There can be electrical alternance. There can be ST elevation in lead AVR and sometimes lead V1. Along with that, you may have ST depression, especially from V4 to V6, and sometimes low voltage ECG is recorded. Our patient had so many ECG findings with higher suspicion of pulmonary embolism. Eventually, the CT pulmonary angiography was done and which confirmed a right-sided pulmonary embolism in our patient and was appropriately treated. I want to discuss couple of minutes on concept of S1Q3T3, which is very oftenly spoken, especially in the exams, that it is a classical pattern in pulmonary embolism. So what is S1Q3T3? We have seen that you will see S wave in lead 1, Q waves in lead 3, and inverted T waves in lead 3. This is also known as McGinn-White sign. So how do you get these ECG changes? If you look at the coronal section of the heart, you can see pulmonary artery, right atrium, and right ventricle. Now, if I hypothetically say that a clot comes and blocks the pulmonary artery, what do you think will happen to the right side of the heart, especially right ventricle? There will be acute increase in the volume and pressure of the right ventricle, and this will eventually cause acute right heart strain. This is what causes S1Q3T3 pattern. Indirectly, this is acute cor pulmonale. Remember, you don't only see S1Q3T3 in pulmonary embolism, but also some other conditions such as acute bronchospasm, pneumothorax, for that matter, any condition which causes acute lung injury or acute lung disorder. PE is seen in 15 to 25% of patients who are ultimately diagnosed after CT pulmonary angiography. Now, ECG is often abnormal in these patients, but remember, these findings are neither sensitive nor specific for the diagnosis of pulmonary embolism. Acute PE has variable clinical manifestations, and one must always think it as a differential diagnosis if the patient presents to you with symptoms such as shortness of breath, chest pain, and syncope. ECG will always remain the first bedside investigation in such patients, especially to rule out acute myocardial infarction. But as far as pulmonary embolism is considered, it is not the diagnostic tool. It will definitely help you to think of pulmonary embolism. Hence, high index of suspicion is very, very important if you need to save a life. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if so, please do not forget to share it with your colleagues and friends. I would definitely like to hear from you, so please do not forget to share your thoughts and suggestions in the comment box below. If you have not subscribed already to this, please do subscribe and click on the bell icon so that whenever there is a next video uploaded, you can be notified. Also, if you have any interesting ECGs which you would like to share, please email it to me at weeklyecgexercises@gmail.com. Thank you.